This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Empty streets and closed shops as general strike in Sudan continues. We look at the achievements of Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki's one-day state visit to Egypt. And Chinese President Xi Jinping set to visit Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan later this week. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. For those of you joining us across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Bank of Tanzania suspends exchange of Kenyan currency on its banking system. And in sport, Portugal defeats Netherlands to win the inaugural UEFA Nations League trophy. We begin with developments in Sudan, where a general strike is currently underway. Residents in the capital city of Khartoum have mostly remained indoors, and the downtown business district was largely shut on Sunday. Sudanese police fired tear gas at protesters taking part in the first day of a civil disobedience campaign.
Empty streets, shops, and markets closed. A stark contrast to what has been witnessed in Khartoum over the past weeks. The Sudanese Professionals Association has called on people to stay home to protest last week's deadly crackdown against protesters. It says the campaign is another escalation of non-violence resistance and a message to the ruling military council to hand over power to a civilian-led administration.
The blockades are disturbing, but the people are expressing what is in their heart.
In a sign of possible panic, long queues were seen outside petrol pumps and shops as residents rushed to stock up.
We are calling upon the youth to remove the barricades and the streets will be opened, so we will live in peace and then we will rebuild Sudan.
Several international players are trying to mediate the crisis. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed recently held separate meetings with the two sides, calling for quick democratic transition. Chombono, CGTN.
The crisis in Sudan has led to months of bloodshed and protests. But how did it all begin? Let's take a look.
It all started in April when demonstrators launched a sit-in protest in front of the military headquarters in the capital, Khartoum. They wanted longtime President Omar al-Bashir to step down. Bashir was ousted by the army a few days later, but the protest continued. Demonstrators demanding the military to hand over power to a civilian government. Then, talks between the ruling military council and protest leaders began, but despite some breakthroughs, they all collapsed in late May. Thousands of workers went on strike across the country to put pressure on the military. Earlier this week, security forces broke up the sit-in protest. Tensions rose and led to clashes. According to the Sudanese government, the fighting has left over 60 dead. On June 5th, the army offered talks without preconditions, but the opposition turned them down. As the standoff continues, the African Union urges foreign actors to stay away from it. But one question remains. When will the political crisis come to an end?
Well, to discuss the situation in Sudan further, we are joined by Adel Al-Maraki in Egypt. Adel, thank you for taking time out to join us here on Africa Live. First things first, there are reports of deadly confrontations as Sudan grapples with a civil disobedience campaign. What's the latest on this, Adel?
Well, the civil disobedience movement is still ongoing. The calls by the Sudan Professional Association to have an open-ended civil disobedience continues, and it seems that from their latest statement after the first day yesterday that it will keep on moving on, and the calls for the disobedience will last as long as the Military Transitional Council hands in the power to a civilian elected government. This is the announced reason and the announced motive from the Sudanese Professional Association for the civil disobedience. They are encouraging more people to stop from going to their jobs, whether it is a government job or even in the private sector as well. There have been attempts on a Sunday by protesters to build to block the roads and build barricades in the streets so that they would also freeze the movement of pedestrians and vehicles. This is when security forces have tried to intervene and clash with some of protesters. At least 4 have been reported killed and dozens more injured yesterday in some minor clashes that spread in several Sudanese cities. That's the second day on Monday, and the same calls have been continue that civil disobedience. However, there hasn't been any significant report of violence yet.
All right, Adel Al-Marki, thank you for breaking it down for us. We shall return to you live and talk more about this issue a little later on in the bulletin. Adel, thank you for bringing us that story. Moving on, though, meanwhile, Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki has concluded a one-day state visit to Egypt. He met President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and other officials. Afwerki agreed to bolster political and economic ties with Cairo. The two leaders also vowed to cooperate on maintaining security and peace in the Horn of Africa. Our correspondent, Adel Al-Marki, has more.
This is President Isaias Afwerki's third official visit to Cairo since President el-Sisi took office. On Saturday, the two leaders discussed cooperation in regional political conflicts, on top of which Sudan. Red Sea security is the most vital area of coordination between the two nations.
The Red Sea security in the main strategic file is a concern to both nations. Eritrea lies on the southern gates of the Suez Canal. There are concerns that Yemeni Houthi rebels control over Bab al-Mandab Strait. El-Sisi is very interested in securing this region and maintain that piracy does not grow in that area again.
Egypt is the second largest trade partner to Eritrea right after China. Trade volume between the two nations is estimated at around $98 million.
The volume of trade between the two countries does not reflect their deep ties. There have been numerous meetings between the Egyptian and Eritrean officials in the recent years to boost these relations. Egypt has been seeking to take lead in the telecommunications infrastructure in Eritrea, to create agricultural projects, fish farms, and make its construction arm Arab contractors build some 3,000 houses.
El-Sisi and Afwerki agreed on developing cooperation projects between the two sides in various sectors. Cairo is also seeking to intensify technical support programs offered to Eritrea through the Egyptian Agency of Partnership for Development. President Afwerki has commended Egypt's role in supporting Eritrea since its independence and until the recent efforts to lift the UN sanctions imposed over his country. To Egypt, Eritrea is an essential Nile Basin country, which support is definitely needed as Cairo moves to secure its water share. Adel Al-Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
All right, let's return to our correspondent live in Cairo, Adel Al-Marki. All right, Adel, thank you for sticking around. Let's return back to our top story. Khartoum comes to a standstill as general strike takes effect. Well, what we're hearing on the ground, Adel, is that protesters remain adamant that Sudan's military rulers should hand over power to a civilian-led transitional administration. Now, from your perspective, what needs to be done to overcome obstacles to a workable consensus for the country? Adel?
Both parties need to restart building trust in the negotiations and to have confidence that both parties will be committed in a peaceful transition of power in Sudan. There is a huge mistrust growing among protesters that the Sudanese Transitional Military Council is not handing in or does not intend to hand the power to a civilian power or a civilian authority. That has been fueling the calls for the civil disobedience. And And actually, the calls for the civil disobedience have started to become louder and become clearer right after Sudanese forces have evacuated by force the protesters sit-in at the headquarters of the military and the armed forces in Khartoum. Right after that is when the events turned to become escalating from both sides. But at the same time, it seems that the security forces, the Military Transitional Council, is restructuring its security apparatus. There has been a reshuffle in the security leadership. At least around 35 generals have been forced to early resignation, to early retirement, sorry, and there seems to be a reshuffle that is following the deadly clashes that has left some 100 Sudanese protesters killed and injured after the use of force from the Sudanese military power. There seems to be division within the military power, and this reshuffle apparently aims to target a unity among the military council so that there wouldn't be any generals or any movements against the protesters that takes place from partial leaders within the military institution. And that's, if that takes place quickly and immediately as the reshuffle we've seen today, this might be a step to start with and re-establish trust between the military institution and the protesters' leaders.
Well, Adel, my final question to you before we let you go. Could you talk to us about what more the international community can do to bring stabilization to the country?
Well, there have been a lot of movements recently, especially on the level of nations and African nations leadership. We've seen Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia going to Khartoum, meeting with Sudanese military representatives, and also meeting with the leaders of the opposition leadership powers. However, right after his meeting with the opposition powers, some of the opposition unions reported that their leaders have been arrested right after meeting Abiy Ahmed, which has been also fueling the skepticism among the protesters. So there needs to be, from the international community, an equal stance toward the military transitional council and the protesters. Whenever the protesters feel that the military council is being favorited against them, the calls for their civil disobedience and the protests to escalate will grow. And this is something that especially region powers like Egypt, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and other neighboring countries to Sudan do not want. They want immediate stability and a resort to calm within Sudan. The country, the North African region, is quite turbulent, and there are a lot of conflicts, especially like the ones in Libya. No one wants to see another replication of such a division or a resort to violence happening in Sudan. And this what comes as a responsibility for regional powers and the international community to support a peaceful dialogue between the Sudanese powers and maintain that no violence is being used.
Well, there you have it. Adel Al-Maraki talking to us live from Egypt. Thank you so much for your insight and analysis. Khartoum comes to a standstill as general strike takes effect, and once again protesters vow to continue with strike until their demands are met. Moving on to Egypt, a number of lawmakers are drafting a law that will censor non-licensed clerics from posting fatwas and other religious decrees online. It's part of a plan to curb extremism on social media. Yasser Hakim has more.
Ayman Shusha is living in the United Arab Emirates. He posted several messages on Facebook hailing Wednesday's terrorist attack on security checkpoint that killed 8 soldiers in northern Sinai, Egypt. He was arrested by UAE authorities to be extradited to Egypt. This has raised the issue of combating extremism online.
Egypt has taken several steps to face extremism, such as making a list of the only clerics who are allowed to preach online. There is also a centralized preaching code to prevent deviations from the moderate Islam. A new law has also given powers to authorities to investigate, detain, and try those accused of electronic crimes or spreading of extremism.
A number of parliamentarians are drafting a resolution to ban extremist clerics online. However, it might not be easy to implement.
The sheikh preaching without license is like someone doing a medical operation without being a doctor. It's against the law. and should be controlled and severely punished. The reason for the extremism and hatred we face is because of the lack of control or supervision over who preaches religion in the media and social media. It needs strong implementation.
Besides the military war on terrorism, there is a crackdown on extremist thinking. But some experts believe more needs to be done.
The Arab Quartet of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Bahrain have all agreed for collective action to face extremism online, and they share information and hand over anyone who incites hatred or violence in each country. It's a good example of how this draft law can work, but it will be useless if other countries are not cooperative, because most of the extremist websites are established abroad. So you need to track them abroad, which can only work if other countries are active as well.
Penalties have become more stringent according to a new law passed in 2017. Inciting violence, hatred, or terrorism online could be punishable by 5 years to life imprisonment and could lead to the death penalty if the post has led to an actual crime. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The news continues on Africa Live. Here's a look at what's ahead. The Chinese President Xi Jinping set to visit Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan later this week. And the catwalk thrills from Senegal at a colorful fashion event showcasing African designs.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. The Chinese president is set to pay a state visit to Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan starting on Wednesday. Xi Jinping will visit Kyrgyzstan's capital, Bishkek, first and then attend the 19th meeting of the Heads of States Council of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. On Friday, he'll start his visit to Tajikistan in the capital, Dushanbe, and attend the 5th summit of the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia. China's vice foreign minister said during this morning's press conference that President Xi's visit will boost political trust and cooperation between China and the two nations. His visit is also expected to push forward new developments of the SCO and CICA, contributing to a community of a shared future for mankind. A list of bilateral achievements have been laid out.
We have solid political mutual trust, firmly supporting each other on issues of respective core interests and major concerns. Cooperation on the Belt and Road Initiative has deepened and delivered concrete outcomes, not to mention the fruitful cooperation in economy, trade, energy, connectivity, and people-to-people exchanges. Law enforcement and security cooperation has also deepened. We have effectively combated security challenges and made contributions to regional peace and stability. People-to-people interactions have grown, and bilateral ties have grown more solid. We have also maintained close coordination in regional and international affairs, jointly upheld multilateralism and an open world economy, and upheld a UN-centered international system.
Well, ahead of President Xi's visit to Central Asia, the Chinese ambassador to Kyrgyzstan sat down with our CGTN reporter, and here's what she had to say.
Ms. Ambassador, in what ways will President Xi's visit help boost bilateral ties? What deals or agreements are expected to be made?
Both sides are strongly anticipating this visit. Generally, China-Kyrgyzstan relations are developing well, but both sides think they should further improve them to tap out potential. This time, I think it'll be on political trust. The two presidents will sign an MOU on further deepening their comprehensive strategic partnership. This will create a new plan for further relations between the two countries. Now, we are also talking about building a shared future between China and Kyrgyzstan, and I think this visit will point out the road ahead for that.
Well, some people here say that Kyrgyzstan now has better roads. More people are learning Chinese or working in Chinese companies. How much do you think the Belt and Road Initiative has affected bilateral relations between China and Kyrgyzstan?
The Belt and Road Initiative has contributed a lot to trade connections. Kyrgyzstan citizens are very familiar with online shopping through China's Taobao. We also did a lot on infrastructure connectivity. The China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan road has been put into use, and it is a standard modern highway. Kyrgyzstan has long been troubled by the Tian Shan Mountains, blocking its north and south. The old road can't be used through all seasons, so we are helping them to build the north-south road. We are also helping repair the capital's streets. They don't have good overpasses now, so we will build two for them in the third stage of the project.
What do you think about Kyrgyzstan's planning for hosting this SCO summit?
Since taking over the rotating presidency last June, they've held many events. We're very busy with that this year. They held the defense ministers' meeting, the meeting of Security Council secretaries, a foreign ministers' meeting, and diversified events like a media forum and women's forum. These all laid a good basis for the summit. China has been actively supporting Kyrgyzstan during its rotating presidency.
Security issues will take center stage at the 5th summit of the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia, known as CICA. The event will be held in Tajikistan's capital city of Dushanbe at the end of this week. As an active member of the CICA mechanism, China comes willing to share its experience and wisdom in regional security issues. CGTN's He Weiwei has more.
Asia's largest multilateral dialogue on security issues. At the last CICA summit held in Shanghai in 2014, Chinese President Xi Jinping proposed a new concept for Asian security in order to build a new framework for regional stability and cooperation.
With the changing of times, we cannot let ourselves still stay in a Cold War mindset. We should promote a sustainable security outlook on Asia by upholding the ideas of commonality and cooperation.
It's China's wisdom. Based on the new concepts, China has played a positive role in regional security for the past 5 years. Experts believe that the concept still works today.
Despite ups and downs, we saw some positive signs in regional security thanks to China's consistent efforts. For example, the de-escalation of the Korean Peninsula tensions and a code of conduct in the South China Sea between China and ASEAN members. These prove that President Xi's proposal is not outdated and will still be an important guide on security issues.
The 5th CICA summit will be held in Tajikistan, another opportunity for leaders of Asian countries to sit down for direct and in-depth talks.
China is willing to share its experience and solutions on regional security issues. Besides, we'll also continue to implement the Belt and Road Initiative in order to build a community of common destiny.
Asia finds itself in need of frank dialogue to reduce security threats. It takes time and efforts to further enhance the regional stability, and it's believed that the upcoming CICA summit will be another important step toward that joint mission for Asian countries. He Weiwei, CGTN, Beijing.
In Britain, 11 candidates are running to replace Theresa May as the next Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister. Boris Johnson, the former Foreign Secretary and Mayor of London, is the front runner. He says he wants to cut business taxes and relieve the income tax burden on some workers. Jeremy Hunt, Britain's Foreign Secretary and another candidate in the race, has the support of the UK Work and Pensions Minister, Amber Rudd. After the nominations, the Conservative lawmakers will hold several rounds of votes, and the party will release the results in late July. During the contest, Theresa May will remain acting party leader and serve as prime minister. Now, according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, 80% of Benin's 11 million people depend on agriculture. A program on the outskirts of the country's capital is now promoting traditional ways of farming on a large scale, aimed at teaching the youth the importance of food security in a sector they often avoid. CGTN's Laura Wallambengo reports.
Participants of an agro boot camp in the farmlands of Benin harvest maize, cowpeas and rice under the gaze of the sun. The program in Toribosito, just outside Cotonou, aims to teach basic traditional ways of agriculture.
Agroecology requires us to feed the soil, so that the soil feeds the plant and the plant feeds us.
The boot camp is part of a wider movement to encourage self-sufficiency on the continent, where about $64.5 billion is spent in a year importing food. For $45 a week, agro boot campers learn agricultural techniques, follow marketing courses, and network with successful agro-entrepreneurs.
We chose this concept because we want to show young people that we are strong together. So if everyone does their part, we can build and create something serious and good.
Camp organizers also want to show young unemployed people that working the land can offer an alternative and successful livelihood. All they require is to create businesses with awareness of ecology and of the climate.
There are a lot of resources and the soil is incredible. I've learned that these initiatives exist and that a network exists, and that we can join this network easily because it is very open.
10 participants of the program have already launched new agricultural activities, farms or enterprises. More camps are planned later in the year in North Benin, Chad and Côte d'Ivoire. Laura Wallambengo, CGTN.
Chirping of birds, sounds of whispering trees, burbling of streams. When sunlight sets the forest's leaves aglow, and waterfall surges down from the mountain, we see and hear the Earth's wondrous beauty. The Earth is meant to be appreciated, and the life of its inhabitants deserves our endless exploration. Come with CGTN to listen and see, in chorus of life, to marvel at nature and life.
Anh chém à? Hạ Lân. Chém à, chết, chết, chết.
And here's a recap of our top stories making headlines this hour. We start in Sudan, where a general strike is currently underway. Residents in the capital city of Khartoum have mostly remained indoors, and the downtown business district was largely shut on Sunday. Sudanese police fired tear gas at protesters taking part in the first day of a civil disobedience campaign. The Sudanese Professionals Association has called on people to stay home to protest last week's deadly crackdown against protesters. Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki has concluded a one-day state visit to Egypt. He met President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and other officials. Afwerki agreed to bolster political and economic ties with Cairo. The two leaders also vowed to cooperate on maintaining security and peace in the Horn of Africa region. The Chinese president is set to pay a state visit to Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan starting on Wednesday. Xi Jinping will visit Kyrgyzstan's capital Bishkek first and attend the 19th meeting of the Heads of State Council of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. On Friday, he'll start his visit to Tajikistan in the capital Dushanbe and attend the 5th summit of the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia. And in Britain, 11 candidates are running to replace Theresa May as the next Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister. Boris Johnson, the former Foreign Secretary and Mayor of London, is the front-runner. He says he wants to cut business taxes and relieve the income tax burden on some workers. Jeremy Hunt, Britain's Foreign Secretary and another candidate in the race, has the support of the UK. And that is a recap of your top stories making headlines this hour. Once again, the news continues on Africa Live here on CGTN. Let's take a look at more stories coming your way. Bank of Tanzania suspends exchange of Kenyan currency on its banking system. Plans for Uganda-Tanzania oil pipeline. It suffers a setback over concerns on the environmental impact of the project.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Bank of Tanzania has suspended the exchange of Kenyan shillings in their banking system. The move follows Kenya's decision to demonetize the 1,000 Kenyan shilling banknotes in a bid to fight illicit financial deals. However, the old 1,000 banknotes will remain in circulation until October the 1st. Tanzania's central bank also suspended repatriation of all Kenyan currency into the country. Banks in Tanzania have been instructed to enhance their due diligence when handling money from or going into Kenya. Businesses operating between Kenya and Tanzania will be affected by the decision, as they will be unable to move cash between the two countries. Trade of goods and services between Kenya and Tanzania is likely to decline in the period the suspension will be in effect. And in Uganda, a group of 30 international and local campaign groups have petitioned two banks to abandon plans to raise funds to build an oil pipeline to export oil between Uganda and Tanzania. They argue the project would damage local livelihoods, water resources, and wildlife. South Africa's Standard Bank Group and Japan's Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation are helping to raise $3.5 billion needed to finance the pipeline. The pipeline, which will run from fields in the west of Uganda to Tanzania's Indian Ocean port of Tanga, is vital to developing the East African nation's oil reserves, which are estimated to hold 6 billion barrels. It is estimated and expected to transport about 200,000 barrels per day when oil production peaks. Well, technology has evolved to such an extent that it is no longer seen as a separate element of any business, and that includes the oil and gas sector. It is now an integral part of every business, and if it is not developed in conjunction with business plans and models, it is very likely that the business will fail. CGTN's Angela Coppola reports from Luanda.
The use of technology now spans countries, continents, and the world. Work is done in every part of the world to solve localized problems and challenges.
We've also been working hard in Africa, especially with our open labs and other countries, to build technologies which will work for this continent and move forward. So therefore, we're in a very good place to be able to make a difference here and to take Angola a long way forward and be more competitive.
Technology has ingrained itself in every sphere of business and every business sector, to the extent that all businesses are now technology businesses.
And oil and gas in Angola are really no exception to the rule. So this really poses, an opportunity but also a challenge, right? Because as you think about it, the jobs of tomorrow in oil and gas probably don't exist today. So how do we think about upskilling and creating jobs that will be also more inclusive to women?
We have worked very hard in the fourth industrial revolution. We work with 80,000 research developers, and we're working very hard to improve the communications, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, to make it more effective and efficient, to make sure that we can take advantage of the challenges that we have and improve the education, improve the lifestyle.
Data has become ubiquitous, regardless of the industry and the country that business operates in.
That means that, the way we look at oil and gas today is probably going to be very different to what we'll do 5 years from now. Probably we'll need more data scientists and geologists. So think about women in that perspective. How do we get more inclusive in creating those jobs and appealing with those new jobs also to women?
Technology and the oil and gas sector are synonymous with each other, but it's now important that that technology is used to enhance the lives of people working in that sector. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Luanda, Angola.
Ethiopia's parliament is set to approve a law covering the lift of the telecommunications sector in the country. This will establish an independent communication regulator responsible for promoting a competitive market. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed recently pledged economic reforms aimed at boosting the sector that caters to cover over 60 million mobile subscribers. International telecommunication firms have expressed interest in the country, with the sector being protected by a state monopoly. Several companies have expressed interest, including France's Orange, MTN of South Africa, Britain's Vodafone Group, the UAE's Etisalat, and Zain of Kuwait. The economy of landlocked Botswana is buzzing as Chinese businesses flourish in the country. Chinese-made goods are becoming increasingly popular in the southern African country. Chinese business people are now aiming to manufacture and sell goods locally. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy reports from Botswana's capital, Gaborone.
Chinese goods are emerging as popular items of trade among the people of Botswana, with private Chinese businessmen and women exporting in increasing quantities of a wide variety of products directly into the Botswana market. Chinese inroads into the Botswana market is being viewed by local citizens as a win-win situation, since many benefit from what they say is cheap and yet fashionable products.
The Chinese products, they are fashionable. I would say they are very cheap. We take them and go and sell to other people who are very far.
Exports from Botswana to China stood at $16 million in 2017, while China's export to Botswana for the same period amounted to approximately $60 million. To further boost trade with the southern African country, China is exempting import tariffs on some commodities from Botswana so as to facilitate their entry into the Chinese market, further improving relations with Beijing.
I was here early on, that was about 18 years ago. It wasn't as more friendly as now, so I can see there's a lot of things improving, especially the relationship.
Alicia Shongna is a prosperous Chinese businesswoman based in Botswana's capital, Gaborone. Her store attracts hundreds of people daily.
It's all give them like the warehouse price. You understand, here is warehouse, so everything is cheap, everything is going to give them profit, some things, so them is like buy here.
It's quite busy nowadays, because of the foreign customers, like Lesotho customers, Zambians, and few of Zimbabwe customers.
Price-sensitive businessmen and women in Botswana continue to welcome the easy availability of low-priced Chinese goods. China and Africa remain in close consultation and cooperation in safeguarding the common interest of the continent and the Asian country. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Gaborone, Botswana.
Well, if you have a craving for sweet things, honey is one thing to go for. In Uganda, honey enthusiasts graced the annual honey tasting event, savoring a wide bounty of honey from across the country. Leon Siyenga reports.
As sweet as honey. With every scoop, a delightful pleasure. For Anne and Fraser, it's been a thrilling experience testing Ugandan honey.
And there's a garlic one as well, which I really want to try because I think that would be really nice with like savoury stuff. So I didn't know there were so many different flavours, tastes. Really nice.
The unique array of honey flavours got Alexander Chiza buzzing.
My favourite is the one with the OD, or we call Pia. This, it has been so well because I've been taking OD without honey. But now when you get it and it's mixed up with honey, it adds on the already sweetness that's there.
The honey testing event is in its second year. It aims at promoting honey and other honey products. It is gradually catching on. The several varieties of honey here have teased the revelers' taste buds. The focus now for the exhibitors is to get more honey into people's homes. Sandra Ejang is a bee farmer and honey entrepreneur. Ejang is the brains behind the honey testing event. She says increased healthy eating habits among Ugandans have led to more demand.
Honey is a very big thing in our homes because it takes care of all those issues. It helps to prevent the common cold, taken regularly. It is a good bread spread. You don't have to buy Blue Band, so you keep the family healthy. It's an alternative for sugar.
According to the Uganda Honey Beekeepers Association, over 5,000 metric tons of honey is produced per year. Improving bee farming could increase the stock-ups, and with that, plenty to savour for the honey lovers. Leon Sanyanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
This is Africa Live on CGTN. We've got a lot more wonderful, amazing, and inspiring stories coming your way. Let's take a sneak peek at the headlines. The catwalk thrills from Senegal at a colorful fashion event showcasing African designs.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Thousands of Egyptian children are estimated to begin living in the streets. The North African nation has brought officials and NGO workers together in a campaign which aims to provide full assistance to street children. Here's Adel Al-Maraki with more.
The only statistics about street children in Egypt is 5 years old. It has estimated some 20,000 homeless children distributed in 10 governorships. The number is expected to have become much bigger. The nation's Social Solidarity Ministry has been leading a massive campaign to rehabilitate street children for more than 2 years.
We've assisted 19,000 children during the last period. 1,500 children have been rehabilitated in social care organizations. Some of the children have been reunioned with their families. Unfortunately, many families are not capable of dealing with their children after that experience, so for a limited period we put them in foster homes until we give training for the families and manage each case.
17 teams roam Egyptian cities almost on daily basis. Each team is made up of 6 health and psychological professionals to assist each case. Yet major challenges persist.
Our main challenge is beggars. Compassion is not always good. When people start giving children money aiming to assist them, it's a disaster. The result is that children make a lot of money by staying in the street. To help, people should call Children Without Shelter campaign to report the location of street children. They can donate money to our centers. That's the best way to help.
The Ministry of Social Solidarity is allocating funds to renovate its foster homes and to establish new ones across Egypt. In 2019, Children Without Shelter campaign has extended its activities to 4 new governorships. There are no laws yet in Egypt that criminalize certain behavior towards street children, like giving them money, leaving them vulnerable to many abusers. The civil society, including NGOs, are engaging heavily to assist the government in its national campaign to make Egyptian streets free from street children. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And let's turn to the world of fashion. The 17th edition of the Dakar Fashion Week has been going on in Senegal. The 5-day event exhibited designs from 28 participants, including Congolese designer Lupita Swaga and her Afrofuturistic collection. Spanish actress Rosie De Palma was also among the audience. De Palma was given 8 pages in the next issue of Vogue Spain to talk about the Dakar Fashion Week. Here's CGTN's Noel Wakugu with more details.
Fashionistas and designers from all over the continent gathered at this latest installment of the Dakar Fashion Week. Those keen on trend-setting could learn a thing or two from the collections, such as the Moyo Bibi. As the models were showcasing the various designs on the runway, others were busy backstage, getting ready for their turn to grace the catwalk.
Every year, we want to get better and stronger. We want to show the world the beautiful African designs and how creative our designers are.
Adama is not only the event's creator, but also the brain behind these pieces. Those in attendance had a memorable experience and can be blamed for being a little overexcited as they sought to capture the moment on camera. Among the audience was Spanish actress Rosie De Palma, who will use her 8 pages on the next issue of the Vogue Spain to highlight the Dakar Fashion Week.
There will be space for everyone. Everyone deserves a spot, and we will do our best to make sure that everyone is acknowledged. The important thing is to put the focus on this Fashion Week so that people living in Europe can see that the Fashion Week has a huge significance to the people in the continent.
De Palma says she will highlight the colorful event in the popular magazine and do her best to showcase African talent in fashion and design. No Makugu, CGTN.
And we've got your sports news coming up after the break. Don't touch that dial, don't go away. Here's a sneak peek at that headline. Portugal defeats Netherlands to win the inaugural UEFA Nations League trophy.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every